You did an experiment once where you gave cocaine to bees, and you realize uh, they move faster and they dance faster. Using cocaine to do research, underrated or overrated? Weird question.
Underrated, yeah. If it's used properly, it can be a very potent tool. Yeah. So in our case, that research had a very specific purpose, which is to explore the reward system in the context of social organization and social behavior. So we started this conversation talking about incentives. And the reason why there is such a thing as an incentive is because their brains have reward processing. So something can feel good. And so the reward system is, talk about conserved, we see that in the brains of all organisms that have been studied. So food lights up the reward system. So that's one element of that. So reward systems evolved in brains to help guide and shape behavior. Reward systems are also very flexible and can be coupled with a variety of external stimuli. Just think about it with food. If you're hardwired so only one kind of food is going to feel good when you eat it, well, there's a role for that. Those are called specialists. There are species that are specialists, but that's going to be a narrow approach. Many animals are much more flexible with respect to food. So they might sample some food. That's pretty good. Well, I'm going to eat more of it. What's pretty good? Well, that's affecting a brain region, and that's working that way. So we get that for food. We had the idea a number of years ago that social behavior might also feel good. Cooperating might also feel good. And just take the intuition. When you look at child rearing, that's a big part of child rearing, is to imbue children with the idea that when you do something for someone else, you should feel good. So you give them brownie points, you reward them, you compliment them. That's affecting the brain. So you make it more likely that a child's going to do that again. So that's affecting the reward system. So we wondered whether that approach in thinking about the evolution of social behavior could apply to the honeybee. So we looked at the dance language, and the dance language is the honeybee's symbolic communication system. Because if you compare an insect that has a more of a solitary lifestyle, it doesn't live in a large group, doesn't live in a society, doesn't coordinate its activities with others, when such an individual finds good food, it eats more. It eats that food. When a honeybee finds good food, she doesn't eat more. She collects more of it and brings it home, and she dances more. So there's a me to we switch there from selfish behavior to cooperative, altruistic behavior. We knew from studies of fruit flies that eating behavior was regulated by a particular neurochemical. And we tested that neurochemical to see if it made bees dance more. And the same neurochemical that makes flies eat more makes honeybees dance more. So we wanted to interpret that in the context of reward. So we stepped back and said, well, what's one of the most potent chemicals out there that affects the reward system? And sadly, and I emphasize that word, sadly, the answer is cocaine. So what is addiction? Addiction is the hijacking of the reward system so that you want more, you want more, you want more. And the reward system is highly flexible in what it's coupled to. And that's great to allow plasticity. You can learn new things. And if it feels good, that helps you form the right opinions and pathways associated with that. it can also be bad. So someone can become addicted to music, so that's great. So they become hardcore musician, they practice all the time, and as long as they take care of everything else, that's okay. If you're addicted to a drug of abuse, that's not okay. So cocaine is that. And so we thought, well, in order to help understand whether we can interpret our findings that this same neurochemical that makes flies eat more, makes honeybees dance more, in order to interpret that in the context of social reward, we picked cocaine and asked whether it makes bees dance more. And since it's chemically related to the chemical that we were studying, it had a built-in connection there. And so it was a way to push the analysis forward and explore that social reward concept. And so that's why we did it.
That was quite a fascinating explanation. And even thinking about addiction in that way as the hijacking of the reward system,
Mm-hmm.
it's such an interesting way to look at it, because in a way there are many addictions in today's society.
Mm-hmm.
So in your perspective, like, what do you see are the modern day addictions, perhaps that we don't realize yet, but in the future we'll look back and that was a thing that hijacked the reward system of humans.
Mm-hmm. Well, like anything, it's a word that evokes a certain set of meanings, and then you need to unpack that and then decide what you're exactly talking about. So, and I'm not an expert on drugs of abuse, but the general idea is if you're talking about an addiction that is detrimental to your well-being. So your family life is affected, your personal life is affected, you take more risks than is reasonable, then you say, hey, I got a problem, there's an addiction there. And so like a lot of people say, I'm addicted to my phone, or my kid's addicted to, to their cell phone, to video games. So you need to look at that carefully. Are they ignoring everything else? Are they ignoring family? Are they letting things go, to the detriment of their well-being, or are they just doing that, what seems like a whole lot? And it's a scale. It's a relative scale. Something to one person might seem excessive, and to someone else might not seem excessive. So I think it's really hard to say. That said, certainly people are worried about video game addiction, right? That's a thing. People are worried about that. And people are worried about, of course, drugs of abuse. And we think about the use of computers and cell phones, and parents are worried about that with respect to their kids. How that's going to shake out, I think is maybe too early to tell. But those are the kinds of things that we are on the